Welcome to another episode of Primility Primer, our morning reminder of the power of balancing pride and humility as we go about our daily lives. This is episode number 65 as we begin a brand new week. I am your host, Jared Morris, and I want to begin today's episode by telling you a story. And here is that story. Once upon a time, there was a wise man who used to go to the ocean to do his writing. He had a habit of walking on the beach before he began his work. One day, as he was walking along the shore, he looked down the beach and saw a human figure moving like a dancer. He smiled to himself at the thought of someone who would dance to the day, and so he walked faster to catch up. As he got closer, he noticed that the figure was that of a young man, and that what he was doing was not dancing at all. The young man was reaching down to the shore, picking up small objects, and throwing them into the ocean. He came closer still and called out, "Good morning. May I ask what it is that you are doing?" The young man paused, looked up, and replied, "Throwing starfish into the ocean." "I must ask then, why are you throwing starfish into the ocean?" asked the somewhat startled wise man. To this, the young man replied, "The sun is up and the tide is going out. If I don't throw them in, they'll die." Upon hearing this, the wise man commented, "But, young man, do you not realize that there are miles and miles of beach, and there are starfish along every mile? You can't possibly make a difference." At this, the young man bent down, picked up yet another starfish, and threw it into the ocean. As it met the water, he said, "It made a difference for that one." I love that story. I've heard it before, but I heard it again this weekend watching, of all things, an NFL pregame show, because it is a story that has proven to be a driving force in the life of Jason Garrett, who is a professional football coach here in the United States for the Dallas Cowboys. And this story, he actually has a foundation called the Starfish Foundation, and it's a story that he's used to help drive the football camp that he runs every year at Princeton University, where he went to school. And he brings in a lot of underprivileged kids and brings in some of his players and some of his past players, and it's a free camp, and they teach these guys football, try and teach them some life skills. And they had a really, really good story on one of these pregame shows about the first player from that camp who now became an NFL player. And they actually ended up facing off this weekend. But the player talked about the importance of that message and what he learned at that camp, and how he learned that he could compete. He could do what he set his mind to. And it's a great story. And Garrett tells that story. He tells a little bit of a shorter version of it. And the origin of the story is actually, it was written by a man named Loren Eiseley. And I believe it was in a book called The Star Thrower. And I'll link to it. The actual story is much longer and doesn't quite spell out the lesson of it. It made a difference to that one quite so explicitly, but still a great story. And it's kind of been adapted and used, and sometimes it doesn't always get attributed. I had to go do some research for it this morning to find out where the original story came from. But I love that story because it really, again, it describes the essence of primility, right? Because think about the boy in that story who's walking along the beach, and he's picking up these starfish and he's throwing them in the ocean. And there are hundreds of thousands, millions, however many there are, as you picture this happening. And he's throwing them in one by one. And it's that pride that he has, that he can make a difference, even if it's only one by one. And even if he could only reach a small fraction of the number of starfish that are there on the beach, he doesn't look at it and say, well, my efforts won't make a difference. You know, what I'm doing isn't that big of a deal. I can't help all of them. So, you know, this is too overwhelming. I'm not going to do it. He understands. He has pride in his ability to make that difference, even if it's only for one starfish at a time, even if it's only for a small number of the overall starfish that are there on the beach. And yet it also shows his humility, that he's not thinking less of himself. He's thinking of himself less. He's thinking of others more. He's thinking about these helpless starfish, that if he doesn't throw them back, they will die. And he could be doing plenty of other things with his time, with his efforts, with his actions. And yet he's here helping these starfish. And not only that, he's inspiring somebody else, this man who was walking along to see him. And I think it's an excellent lesson that we can all learn something from, about the importance of our actions and the significance of our actions. I know I can use an example from my own professional life where part of what I do is help coach podcasters, showrunners, people who are running their own shows. And a lot of times they will describe to me frustration that their audience isn't growing fast enough or the numbers aren't there where they are. And yet, if they can just reach those one or two people, a guy described that to me a couple of weeks back, how the download numbers were just so not what he wanted, and yet he got that one email from somebody that changed his perspective, and he realized that he was making a difference, and that kept him going. And that's important. Not all of us are going to be able to help 100,000 people at one time, but if we can help one person with one action and then move on to the next and help another person, and if we're all doing that, if we have that sense of pride in our abilities and what our actions can mean, and that sense of humility to put that to use of helping others, and imagine what we can do. This boy helped hundreds, thousands. We don't know how many starfish he helped, lives that he saved, but we know that it was significant, and it certainly made a difference for each one that he was able to do. And that's the question I'll start out this Monday, this new week of Primility Primer episodes with, is who or what can you make a difference for? Because maybe it's not as big a difference as you dreamed, but it's a difference, and it will matter, and your actions will matter. Let's do something significant this week. All right. Thank you very much for watching and listening to this episode of Primility Primer. I appreciate you being here. We go live every day at 6:30 Central Time at primility.com/live. And then, of course, you can listen to the podcast afterwards. If you are not on the email list yet, go to primility.com/join. Our Monday newsletter comes out on Monday morning, typically right around 7:30 Central Time. And then you'll also get the Friday digest that will allow you to catch up on any episodes that you miss throughout the week. All right, everybody, have a great Monday. Have a great week. And we'll be back tomorrow morning with another brand new episode of Primility Primer. Respond. What do you think I was going to forget?